To me, it sounds a little fishy, and that's it. You know, I just don't like fishy things out there.
Daniel Heimpel smells something he doesn't like in the new gang policy of the LA Mayor's office. He wrote about it in a compelling article in the LA Weekly, where he related his interview with the new deputy mayor, Reverend Jeff Carr, the gang czar. We here at Full Disclosure had interviewed Reverend Carr last month and thought Mr. Heimpel's concerns needed attention. Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa created the Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development in August of 2007 and appointed Reverend Jeff Carr as its director with the mission to combat the city's gang epidemic. Reverend Carr has focused his efforts on creating the GRYD zone.
So we've identified 12 targeted geographic specific areas that we're calling gang reduction and youth development zones. They are anywhere from approximately 3.5 miles square in size. Those 12 areas contain 8% of the population of the city of Los Angeles, but they have 35% of all the gang-related violent crime in the city of LA. So they're 4 times more violent on average than the rest of the city.
Reverend Carr is implementing his anti-gang program based on 2 strategies: prevention and intervention.
So around prevention, we're really focused on trying to keep kids from joining gangs in the first place, cut off the supply of kids who think that joining a gang is a realistic option. And then the second strategy is around intervention. How do you actually intervene in the lives of young people who've already made, to one degree or another, a commitment to being a part of a street gang, and then how do we actually extricate them from being involved in that gang and that lifestyle and the negative criminal lifestyle, and put them on an exit ramp from that highway to a more productive.
We asked him how he was implementing his program. The mayor's office has put out a bunch of RFPs, that's request for proposals, to locate organizations who will receive city funding to implement his 2 strategies.
Well, for the contractors that we're actually giving monies, those are largely nonprofit organizations that are rooted in neighborhoods. They're community-based. They have lots of experience in working with young people and families in those communities. The intervention groups are very similar. They often have young adults, young men and young women who actually grew up in those neighborhoods, may have had some affiliation with a gang at some point in time, may have actually been incarcerated in the past, but who have decided to redeem their lives and want to bring others along with them.
How much money is involved in this prevention and intervention program, we asked him?
$1 million in each one of the 12, so
Oh.
$12 million for prevention and $500,000 for intervention in each of the 12 areas, $6 million. And then we have about $2.4 million that we've set aside for some smaller hot spots outside of those 12 areas for prevention and intervention. So our total investment that'll actually go out in contracts outside the city is over $20 million for prevention and intervention.
Over $20 million of desperately needed tax money is going to be distributed by the GRYD program. Daniel Heimpel was tracking down how that money was going to be used. Something about the answers that he got from Reverend Carr raised his curiosity.
I start out just asking about the way they select the committees that dole out the grants of $500,000 or $250,000 on a 6-month basis for prevention or intervention in the 12 grid zones. So I was just going through the nitty-gritty of that selection process, and so it was just a matter of whittling questions down to the point where I asked him who was selecting those nonprofits who were receiving that chunk of the $24 million annual budget that GRYD has, largely out of the general fund. And when I asked who, the answer was vague. And it was people in law enforcement, people who deal with gang members or youth that could be prone to being in gangs, people from rec and parks. And I said, well, okay, but who? What are their names? And his answer was, well, only the mayor, myself, and the city attorney know. And that, to me, is always a little bit strange when things are kept anonymous.
So what did you do?
Well, then I said, why? Of course, that's the next question. And to the why, he said, well, it's a question of safety against retaliation. And I don't know much about gangs. So on the face of it, I said, okay, well, that's your answer now. And there was no going further on the subject. He wasn't going to tell me names right then. But it was that was his answer. And to me, not taking anything away from Reverend Carr, because he seemed like a straight up guy, but it wasn't a satisfactory answer to me.
Being an investigative reporter, Mr. Heimpel did what any responsible journalist should always do. He attempted to verify the legitimacy of the fear of retaliation. He checked with other large communities with gang problems. He found this policy of anonymity to be extremely unique to Los Angeles.
I thought that was strange, so I went around and saw whether or not there was a similar situation going on in any other gang prevention task forces in the country. I mean, first of all, there's not that many of them. It's a very unique situation. In this case, it's basically the mayor's office setting up. It's the mayor's baby. So that was kind of unique. So I went around looking to see if that's common practice and whether or not this question of retaliation holds up. And talking to people across the country, I mean, nobody had really heard of that before. And that's something I'm researching more right now. But so that's the road I'm taking further. So at this point, all I know is that the reaction, people who deal with this kind of stuff, was that they're not selected by an anonymous committee of 50 people.
The office of the deputy mayor claimed that everyone who gets a contract for all this money will be carefully vetted through a committee or commission structure.
So there was no direct indication that there were certain checks that you needed to do to make sure that these people were able to deal with gang members. Of course, I mean, I'm sure that they're well qualified, but the thing is that there's no way to know if they're well qualified if you don't know who they are.
We joined Mr. Heimpel in wondering where the danger exists for these commission members.
The danger was, retaliation, meaning that, my presumption is that that if, let's say, I were on a commission and I decided, well, I want to give money to Homeboys Inc. or Homeboy Inc., whatever it is, that somehow a gang member would understand that I was part of the selection committee, which I don't think gang members are trying to figure out who's part of a selection committee that gives money to a nonprofit, but that I was part of this committee and I gave this money to this nonprofit that was trying to help out kids, and because of that I would be retaliated against. I mean, that is, I think, the argument that's being made to obfuscate who is making these selections.
So why is this a concern? Shouldn't we trust our elected officials to do what is best with our scarce tax money?
My personal feeling is that money will go to gang prevention and intervention. The question is whether or not those people, those nonprofits who are selected to handle this, are the best people to do it. And we know that on the prevention side, 8 of the 12 nonprofits who are going to be receiving this grant money were part of the Bridges program in Los Angeles, which I'm not an LA native, so I don't know the history intimately, but what I do know is that it didn't work too well. So when you're using new money on the same people for the same goal, I'm not sure that that's always the best option when you're trying to solve a problem.
Mr. Heimpel is referring to the Bridges program scandal that occurred with Hector the Weasel Marroquin, who was given close to $1 million to run a program he created and called No Guns. No Guns was supposed to be convincing gang members to stop shooting each other. Instead, Hector the Weasel was recently convicted on federal charges for trafficking in machine guns, selling them to gang members. We asked Mr. Heimpel what he thought should happen.
what needs to be done is there needs to be a real concrete explanation of why these people are anonymous. Because what I have right now is just the explanation of the head of the deputy mayor, Reverend Carr. I need that from the mayor's office. I need that from the city attorney's office to make sure that that's consistent, first of all. And then after that, I will have to find out what the disclosure laws are and whether or not this is actually precedented and actually legal. I'm not sure. To me, it sounds a little fishy, and that's it. I just don't like fishy things out there.
We want to know what you think. Please respond to our survey and be sure to leave your comments below. Number 1, do you think there's a danger to the people who have to decide which gang organization should receive generous grants from the city? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think it's possible to keep gang members and former gang members from serving on the grant approval committees if the process is kept anonymous? Yes or no? Number 3, do you think this is just another corrupt Los Angeles political scheme to give money to political supporters of the mayor? Yes or no? Please be sure to leave your comments below. Thank you.